Hey guys, we're back today with another video in our tanking series, and this time we're looking at the Guardian Druid. So for Shadowlands, not much has really changed. The Guardian Druid's base toolkit is still going to be very similar, and so we're going to start with that as we always do. So the Guardian Druid is an active mitigation kind of physical damage tank, much like the Prot Warrior is that we've already discussed. This means that we're not healing back the damage that we took, like Blood Death Knights or Avenged Demon Hunter do. We want to just passively or actively reduce the damage that we're taking in the first place. So the way that we do that is we generate Rage with our Thrash ability and our Mangle ability, and then we spend that Rage on Iron Fur, which gives us a very short amount of time that we have an armor buff, and we also spend our Rage on Frenzied Regeneration, which is a self-heal that we have. So that's a sort of ebb and flow of the Guardian Druid in terms of actual combat and how you're going to just actively mitigate damage. Like I said, we have two large cooldowns in Survival Instincts and Barkskin that will reduce a greater amount of damage. Those are on longer cooldowns. Like I said, Barkskin is on a 1-minute cooldown, Survival Instincts on a 2-minute cooldown. So outside of those windows, we're just using Iron Fur and Frenzied Regeneration with the Rage that we've pulled up to help mitigate some of the damage that we're taking. So this kind of weak sauce kind of toolkit means that we really need to try to synergize as much of our talents, legendaries that we'll have coming in Shadowlands, some of the conduits that we'll have coming in Shadowlands. We really want to synergize as many of these things as we possibly can so that we give that weak sauce defense system that we have as much of a boost as possible, because we really need it, I'm not going to lie. So one of the ways that we can synergize is by taking a couple of talents in our tree. So we'll want to take Blood Frenzy for sure. This just helps our Thrush generate us more rage every time it deals damage. And we're going to want to take Rend and Tear so that we get this stacking damage reduction. We'll also want to pair this most likely with a legendary that we're getting in Shadowlands called Ursoc's Fury Remembered, which, as you can see, grants us an Absorb Shield. Currently, right now, it's 75% of the damage that we do with Thrash. It was previously 100%, and it got nerfed down to 75%, so we'll see if they do anything with it. I think it feels fine where it's at right now. Pairing these three things together makes effectively Thrash something like another active mitigation button that we can hit, which is on a cooldown that's affected by our haste. So there is that. There's like some control and ability to further reduce the cooldown of Thrash so that we have more uptime on all of that damage mitigation. So that part of it is pretty nice. Moving on to some of the bonuses or buffs or positives. Incarnation as a talent has been pretty greatly buffed. It now gives us a max HP increase of 30%. It reduces the cooldown on Frenzied Regeneration by 75%, which is pretty freaking huge, and also reduces the rage cost of our Iron Fur by 50%. While that's nice, it's not as impactful because Iron Fur is sort of meh. But yeah, the cooldown reduction on Frenzied Regen is really nice, as well as the max HP buff also. So this is going to make that talent Incarnation our strongest defensive cooldown. Moving on to other positive notes. The cooldowns for both Barkskin and Survival Instincts, which I covered earlier, right? These are our longer cooldown damage mitigation abilities. Both those cooldowns have been reduced. So if we take the talent Survival of the Fittest, which I highly recommend, by the way, remember we're talking about synergy here, this will make the cooldowns on these abilities even shorter, with Barkskin now only having a 40-second cooldown, which is freaking incredible, and Survival Instincts being moved down to a 2-minute cooldown, still with the 2 charges that we're used to having. So that should help quite a lot in terms of just keeping ourselves alive and not taking truckloads of damage. But you know, primarily the Guardian Druid still just is what it is, right? It's this giant meat shield. You know, your mastery just gives you a tremendous amount of health and armor, and that's just sort of, you're just meant to get hit in the face a bunch as a Guardian Druid because you have all this health and armor. So yeah, that's sort of the toolkit. Now let's get on to some not great things. Frenzied Regen, as I'm sure a lot of you guys will know by now, was nerfed going into Shadowlands. So previously it healed us for 32% of our HP over a few seconds with 2 charges on a 30-second cooldown, and now it only heals us for 24% of our HP over a few seconds still with 2 charges, still on a 30-second cooldown. So it's just a straight nerf, and unfortunately that ability is still on the global cooldown, which just feels so freaking terrible. It really does. Having to use a global in your rotation to just heal yourself, to keep yourself alive, feels god-awful. So that's pretty bad. Moving on to some other sort of slight nerfs or not great things, our Mythic Plus utility has been brought down a little bit. We still have a lot of the utility that's kind of nice for a bear, like we still have Soothe to remove enrage effects from mobs. We're still going to have Stampeding Roar to speed up our group, and we're also always, of course, going to have our Battle Res ability with Rebirth, but we no longer have the OP sort of wombo combo of Ursol's Vortex plus Typhoon, which helped a lot with pack management in Mythic Plus. So Ursol's Vortex and Typhoon are now tied to affinities, with Ursol's Vortex being tied to Resto affinity and Typhoon being tied to Balance affinity. So obviously this means we're not going to be able to take both of those abilities. And unfortunately for us, again, going back to our kind of weak sauce defensive kit, this sort of means that I think we're still going to have to take Resto affinity. If for no other reason, just the passive healing that you get from the Ysera's gift buff that's constantly passively healing you, and then if you're full, it kind of moves to your group and stuff, is really nice, and I'm not sure that we're going to be able to turn that down. So it's just universally helpful. So those are sort of the base kind of changes, buffs, and nerfs that I'm going to highlight. I'm not going to go over every single thing. A lot of classes got a lot of our spells back, you know, the great unpruning that's happening in Shadowlands. So we do have a lot of other things kind of baseline that I'm just not going to get into because I don't see it being particularly helpful for the Guardian Druid. I'm just covering the stuff that I think is actually going to affect our rotation, our ability to tank. I think the biggest help is for Mythic Plus anyways, which is primarily what I do, is going to be the Fury Remembered Legendary. Being able to pair that with Thrash, I think, is just going to feel really excellent. Everybody on the beta seems to agree that it feels really good just having that, like I said, extra defense. So yeah, that's kind of where Guardian Druids are right now, and that's how you tank with them. It's a very straight up, no nonsense kind of spec. We are in an okay place for Shadowlands on the beta and stuff. We're not the worst tank by far, but we're also not as good as a lot of Guardian Druids probably were hoping. I think a lot of us were hoping they would just fix the freaking spec, and primarily they would do that by, you know, taking Frenzied regen off the dang cooldown already and giving us some kind of active mitigation ability to press outside of just a short armor gain buff in Ironfur. It's just not cutting it, and yeah, makes our health just kind of ping pong all over the place. Doesn't feel great. So that's the Guardian Druid. Just a quick and dirty look at how to play the spec and the changes that you need to know about going into Shadowlands. So I'm going to wrap this video up here, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.